It's all in your head. You don't look sick. Your tests are normal. It's probably anxiety. There's nothing wrong with you. Have you heard these words from physicians, family, and friends? If you're someone who has been swirling through the revolving door of healthcare to find answers about your health, or if you know someone who is going through this experience, then this podcast is for you. Welcome to the Desperate for a Diagnosis podcast with Laura Nozicka. Hello and welcome to the Desperate for a Diagnosis podcast. I am your host, Laura Nozicka, and I am really honored to have Nika Beamon with me today. And boy, is she an impressive lady. And we are going to talk about her and all her amazing endeavors as a writer and producer in New York City and all the cool stuff that she's done. But we're going to be talking about her journey to getting a name for symptoms that she had been experiencing for almost her entire adult life. And she really has made her, as they say, make your mess your message, and has done so much with her story, with books and on the stage and just all kinds of advocacy. Very, very impressive lady. Nika, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And I want to go into more depth into your bio, but I'm so excited that a friend of mine who people actually listen to me sometimes, and which is amazing, that I was sent your article in USA Today about your journey. And he said, I think this is somebody that would be really cool for your podcast. And I thought, oh my gosh, this lady is prime time in New York City. Why would she want to talk to me? So I am honored that you are here.
Well, thank you. Well, first of all, nobody is small talk. Everybody matters. And I think that's what's the most important thing when you talk about illnesses. No one person is more important than the other. So anybody who's willing to talk about it and share information that can help somebody, I'm more than willing to take the time.
Oh, well, thank you for that. Well, I want to make sure that everyone knows more about you. Who is Nika C. Beamon? And here we go. Nika attended Boston College and is a writer and producer for WABC TV Eyewitness News in New York City, the #1 local TV station in the country. She's been a journalist for more than 30 years. She's won a Peabody Award and 4 New York Emmy Awards. Holy cow, girl, that's just way impressive. She is the author of the nonfiction book, I Didn't Work This Hard Just to Get Married. Successful single Black women speak out. Okay, we're going to have to talk about that because I want to know what that's all about. Single girl here. Single girl here. I want to know all about it. And it was published by the Chicago Review Press in 2009. And she also wrote the critically acclaimed memoir, Misdiagnosed: The Search for Dr. House, with a foreword from Rhonda McCullough, the wife of the late comedian Bernie Mac. How cool is that? It was also endorsed by author and Maryland Governor Wes Moore, as well as best-selling authors Myra Hornbacher and Richard Cohen. She is the author of 2 novels, Dark Recesses and Eyewitness. She's been a blogger for the Huffington Post and other sites, appeared in dozens of articles, and served as the ambassador for the NYC Autoimmune Walk sponsored by the Autoimmune Association. Oh my gosh, like you've been doing nothing all this time.
I don't do a lot. I'm usually home.
Seriously, oh my gosh. But this is so amazing what you've done, Nika. And again, so many people that I've talked with, and you being a writer and having talked with so many people along the way and helping them make their message. And now here you are doing the same thing. I would love to have you give us a little bit about your journey to getting the diagnosis. And if anything, any story fits the premise of my podcast, it's your story. It really is.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you talked about what my career was. I'm used to talking about other people. I was not as used to talking about myself. And even the book when you're talking about single women, I am not in it. I was like, I am not in it. I did not tell my story, even though at that time, technically, I was single. So I did not tell my story. So I really worked very, very hard for a very long time not to tell my story. Um, and that was an interesting thing because I really felt like, especially in the business I was in, high stress, a lot of hours and those things. I didn't want anybody to ever see the illness that I happened to have as like the whole definition of who I was or for it to limit me in any way. And so for a very long time, I said nothing and I silently dealt with it because I got sick when I was in college. I
Mm.
started to what they call spontaneous fevers, having joint pain, excessive fatigue, and those things. And it was just strange because, I was an athlete for most of my life. And so for me, it was like, okay, I haven't worked out. I haven't done anything. I'm not sure why I'm feeling this way. And it wasn't the usual tired when you're done working out and you're like, I need to recover. It was something far greater than that. So I think that the only good thing was that I always had people who understood something was wrong with me. We just couldn't figure out what that was. And
Mhm.
generally, doctors treated me for what the symptom was rather than trying to find the root of the problem. And I was, for most of my 20s, even though they kind of sucked because I was always tired or always medicated for one reason or another, I just kind of dealt with it because I thought that was the best that I could do. I really didn't think too much of it because, like most people, we're all raised to believe that the doctor sort of is like, who questions their doctor? I didn't go to
Mhm.
medical school. What do I know? If this is what he's saying I need, then this is what I need. Something else would break. I'm like, it must be for a different reason. We'll just fix that. And so I really didn't deal with it very much. Even, amazingly, even in my mid 30s, I had two TIAs, two trans ischemic strokes back to back. And even that was like, they're like, we didn't find the root. The clot seems to be gone. Sometimes it just happens. And we just kind of sort of shrugged it off. And thankfully, I didn't have a lot of residual effects from it. So I just thought, well, this is a warning sign to slow down. Really didn't dwell on it. And amazingly, every crisis just sort of meant like just to move on and to go forward. The thing that really stopped me in my tracks is that I had what swollen lymph nodes for about a year and change. And it actually gives like a bulldog effect. And so instead of just having the regular double chin that I sometimes normally have, it was actually worse and more pronounced than that. And it didn't bother me. I mean, other than being sort of unsightly. And so I just sort of, I would go to the doctor and I'd mention it and they would touch it and go, yeah, they feel like they're swollen. You must have an infection. But nobody really seemed concerned about it at the time until I went to a doctor. My doctor happened to be off. I went to see somebody else in the practice and she went to touch it and it finally hurt.
Mm.
She said, how long has it been like this? I was like, I don't know, a year and change. I don't know. So she said, oh, well, go see a friend of mine. And so I went to go see what I thought was just a friend of hers. And it turned out that he was a surgical oncologist. And I thought it was kind of strange, but he was in the head and neck clinic. So I thought, well, maybe she's just asking him to take a look. And he takes a look and we go into his office. He said, come to my office. And we sit down. And the first thing he says is, so when can we schedule surgery? And I was quite perplexed because I was
Oh,
like, I'm sorry, surgery for what? And he said, oh, did they not tell you they suspect lymphoma? I said, I'm
oh.
sorry, what? Did he just say cancer? And so I was shocked and amazed. And that was the first time that I think I was actually really frightened. I had other medical episodes where they told me that I might have died or I was hemorrhaging or something else, but I never really felt that. But when somebody says cancer, I think that there's nothing that probably wakes you up more than that. And I thought, I'm not 40. I haven't had children. Like what? Like, what do you mean? I have cancer. Like I'm going to die. And that was really, so the start of a journey to take all the lymph nodes out, test them and all of that stuff. Um, and that happened the next year, came back. And so they did more surgery. And so I ended up having six surgical lymph node dissections and
Oh
removal.
my gosh. And
Um,
you were how old, Nika, when it all started?
believe I was 39. I
Okay.
mentally block out a lot of it, which people always think is funny. But what's amazing about it is that you really, if you thought about, and I know I've had 36 procedures. So including those surgeries, I've had other procedures, other biopsies. They biopsy my thyroid a lot. They do that go along with the condition. And so I've had a total of 36 procedures. I know because I paid for them. I was probably already, I believe I was at doctor 21, the 21st doctor. Some of it was because I moved. So when I first started seeing doctors, I lived in Boston. I was at Boston College. I stayed there. I lived there. So I started seeing doctors there. Then I moved to New York and started seeing a host of different doctors. And most people will attest if you're sick a long time and you get your medical insurance through your job, either the plan changes or something. So you're forced to change doctors. So by that point, I had been to about 20 different doctors for for various manifestations of this condition. I'd had pancreatitis. I'd had, liver pain. I'd had other things. But nobody ever looked at it as a collective. After I got this scary, like it could be cancer, I thought, is this like an overall problem? Should somebody be looking at like the whole thing? My now husband, who was then my boyfriend, I had just started dating him, was like, you need like a Dr. House. And I was like, what the heck is Dr. House? And he said, oh, it's the show. And you never watch it. And I was like, I've never seen this show. And so I started watching the show and I'm like, is there such a thing as a diagnostician? Is that like a job? Like, is there somebody's job? Who
Well,
can
honestly, it's every doctor's job, right?
well, yes, absolutely. But I thought, is there somebody who specializes in like rare cases, like something? Because I started to think it was rare because I'm like, they've tested me. By that point, I had been tested for lupus, MS, RA, mono, you name it. I had been tested for it. And I was like, I don't have any of these things, but they all keep telling me they think it's autoimmune, but it's none of these things. I
Well,
don't
and I guess in a way too, lucky or not, you had some pathology going on.
and I didn't
Yeah.
because like most people, I have all these tests done. The doctor holds the records. I never had a copy of my records. I didn't realize at that time that it was important for me to possess a copy of my records. So I would say, like, I got such and such test there. I don't know if they ever checked or not. I never really followed up. I was not my own best advocate. I was not advocating for myself. I kind of took a passenger approach and let them be in the driver's seat. And I never took charge of my health. I thought, well, they're the doctors. Of course, he's going to call the other doctor if I said I had a test. Of course, he's going to check to see what the lab said. Of course, he's going to do that, right? They all do that, don't they? Not necessarily. And that doesn't make them a bad doctor. There's an issue of time. There's an issue of, severity. It also depends on how you're portraying it. I said to someone recently, I used to hate that happy face chart where they would tell you what's your level of pain.
Oh, uh-huh.
Go from
Yep.
like the little smiling dude to the very, very sad dude.
Yep.
And most times when I'd go to the doctor, they'd be rushing in and they'd look like they needed to rush out. So I never wanted to be the person to pick like the really sad face, even if I was in pain, because I thought I was becoming a nuisance. I was just kind of irritating them and interrupting their day. And so I never understood how important it was to be like, no, it's the middle dude. And like, this is really a problem. So I
Mhm.
didn't like to complain. They go, how are you feeling? I'm like, I'm all right. And I would always answer, I'm okay, or it's not so bad, or it's not such a bad day, and always downplaying the symptoms. And without a copy of your medical record, they're not even looking at the collective of your symptoms. I'm complaining about what's wrong today, as opposed to, by the way, I've been feeling pretty crappy for the last few years. After I got the lymphoma scare, I said, no, I need to know what I've already had so I can stop repeating the same test, so I can get new tests so we can finally figure this out because I don't want to die. Like this thing is going to kill me before they figure it out. So I've got to figure it out. So I decided to use my skills as a journalist to try to figure out how does one figure this out? And so I started sort of scouring the internet, figuring out what the best things were to do, what tips other people had. I asked our medical doctor at our station, like, where should I be going? What kind of doctor even treats something if they think it's autoimmune? I mean, the funny thing is, I have every kind of ologist in the world
Yeah.
now, cardiologist, a gastroenterologist, all of these, a nephrologist, all of these things. But I did not then, and I didn't know anybody else who had an ologist. I didn't know anybody who had one of those doctors with ologist at the end. Everybody I knew went to their primary care physician because we were 20s, 30s, and 40s, and that was pretty much all they did. So nobody had any of these specialists, and I didn't even know what kind of specialists I needed. So once I was pointed in the right direction, I said, okay, you know what? I need to find out if there's a place that lists all the best doctors in this country. I want to know where I can go to get the best doctor I could possibly get. And so I found a guide. I said, okay, now I've got a guide. Now I got to, narrow this down. I got to figure out what doctor in this guide is the ologist I need. So I need the
Mhm.
best rheumatologist in New York.
Did you say you referenced the Castle Conley
Yes. So
guide?
when I found a guide, the guide I went to was Castle Conley. And it ranks the best doctors across the country, by the way. You don't have to be in New York, anywhere across the country every year. It ranks the best hospitals. You can find all kinds of stuff here, people. If you have anything medical, they rank it. And so you don't have to be looking for a doctor or a rheumatologist. You can be looking for a hospital, certain kinds of procedures. It's an amazing guide because it allows you to look up all those different specialties and those things so you can get to the root of your issue. And for me, it was finding a rheumatologist. So I wrote down the top 10 rheumatologists that accepted my insurance. Because I said, okay, now I got to pay for this insurance because I was still 30 something. I didn't have that much money. So I was like, okay, how do I do this? I need to go through insurance. And I started trying to make appointments with all. But before I did that, I said, let me go back to all the hospitals I went to, fill out this form, and get a copy of all of my medical records. And so I got a copy of all my medical records, a copy of all my tests. And then I said, okay, let me make appointments. And some of them would make appointments with me, and some of them would not.
Right.
If I said that I was still working and I was still feeling okay, then I wasn't quite sick enough for some. And others said it's too vague for them. I did find 5 of the 10 who were willing to make appointments. And the first one I went to, he pretty much said the same thing. I believe something's wrong with you, but you seem like you're doing okay. Come back when you get worse.
What did you learn about that whole process? That here you are having symptoms, you have however many inches thick of a record of all of your tests and everything that you had done, and there's doctors who wouldn't make an appointment with you. What did
I
you learn
realized a
about
number
that?
of things. Perception is reality. So if you walk in and you look relatively healthy and you don't seem to be in pain, you don't seem to be in any sort of discomfort, if you don't appear with the symptoms that they hope to see for like an overall disease, meaning, if you come in and your hair is perfectly coiffed, you're perfectly dressed, you're working full time, you're not really complaining about pain, that you don't really appear to them to be an urgent case,
Mhm.
something they need to deal with at the moment. If you're not willing to speak up for yourself and say, no, I'm not leaving because I'm here because there really is a problem, you're going to have a problem. You're going to have a problem with some doctors because simply based on time. Again, if you can't get out what you need to say in the first 10 minutes and the appointment's only 15 minutes long, you're pretty much stuck.
You're done, yeah. I know.
You're done.
There's a book called You Don't Look Sick, and it certainly references family, friends of someone who is ill and how they're treated, but it's also, like, with your experience, with physicians as well. I had a podcast guest on who had been suffering for years and eventually got a diagnosis, but she said, "I made sure that I dressed really nice and my hair was done and I looked presentable, and I thought if I did that, the doctor would take me seriously and he would like me enough to want to help me." So when you say perception is everything, and yet she still went years trying to find a name for her symptoms, but you're so right. What's in front of the physician, you get sized up very quickly.
I mean, I also found being a woman doesn't help because sometimes certain things, like if I said I had abdomen pain, sometimes they would write it off of when was your last period? I'm like, I'm
Mm.
not sure what that has to do with that because I know where my uterus is because I am a woman. I know where the uterus is. And I'm talking about in here. Like it's not down there. It's
Yes.
in here.
Yep,
Like, so,
yep.
so you get dismissed a lot because you're a woman. And again, I got retested a million times for lupus and sarcoidosis because they're more common with Black people. The illness that I do have is not common for Black people. And so, being rare doesn't help because they're going to keep looking for the same things because you must have those things. I'm like, at what point does science tell you that that's not what I have and it doesn't mean I have nothing?
Right, right.
Like I said, you have to learn those things. But I also learned that if somebody, if a doctor was intimidating or seemed short with me, that at least initially I would stop talking. So I learned so many other tips, and there's so many great tips, in addition to bringing your medical record, bring somebody with you if you can't talk for yourself. Bring somebody with you who'll remember all your symptoms. Write down all of your symptoms so that you can just hand them a piece of paper and they know what your symptoms are. If for some reason you don't feel comfortable saying it, or you might forget it, don't leave until you have an answer that you want, even if it means booking another appointment, even if they say somebody's after you. If you believe something's wrong with you, then you make another appointment before you leave the building so you can come back and finish what you want to say. Those things are important. Don't lie about your pain on the pain chart. If you're in pain, then indicate you're in pain. It's because if you downplay your pain, then sometimes it doesn't seem an illness as serious as it may be, if that's the case. There were so many things like that that I just had to learn sort of the hard way as you were going along. Also, never take no. They said, so all of these people I found were part of my insurance company. The one doctor who ultimately diagnosed my condition, she was doctor number 4 out of 5 in that segment,
Mm.
um, switched hospitals. She was at a new hospital that went to a new place and did not accept my plan. But because I had seen her initially and got the initial diagnosis with her, I had to write to my medical plan to get a waiver to continue seeing her.
Oh my.
Those are things I was never taught like, how do you do this? Insurance company says no. then you keep fighting until you get to a yes. And eventually you will. It's really annoying. And you got to write a lot of letters and talk to a lot of people. But eventually you can get to a yes. So even doctors that switch plans, you're like, oh my gosh, now I'm not insured by her and I can't see her. She's a specialist. She's 350 an appointment. How do I do this? There are ways around it. You can write to the insurance company if you've seen that doctor before. If
Mm.
they're a specialist in a condition that a lot of people don't treat, a lot of times they'll give you a waiver. I had to learn that. I did not know that that was even possible. I did not
I
know.
I think that's your next book.
I mean, there's so many things, though, I tell people health is the most important thing we have. Without your health, you have nothing. I don't care if you're the richest person in the world. I believe Steve Jobs told us that as well. And the reality is it's the one of the few things that we're never taught how to deal with. Health, health even all the way through death. Cause I have, a million stories about that. Cause unfortunately I lost both of my parents in the last 2.5 years. And you're
Oh,
never taught how to live with bad health, how to deal with bad health, or how to care for someone with bad health,
yeah, yep.
especially all the way to death. And those are like, it's such a huge part of our life. And yet it's something that somehow we neglect to teach other people.
There's
You don't
no
know how to be a patient, so you don't know to have your medical record. You don't know how to speak up. You don't know how to ask for the patient portal so your doctors can share test results. You don't know to ask for those things unless it's just offered to you most times. And for a lot of people, unfortunately, it's not offered to them. It's
Mhm.
not just readily told to them. And so it's so unfortunate that I see a lot of people missing steps in care. I didn't know anything about clinical trials or where to find them. I didn't know that the NIH had a rare disease department that would help diagnose a disease if it was very rare and nobody else could diagnose it. I had to find
How did you find out about that?
it a lot just along the way as I was like trying to research. So once I got a diagnosis, so doctor number 4 says she slides over a piece of paper and it looked like a joke. I didn't know what it was. I was like, is that R2D2? I don't know what it is. I tell people you call it the Star Wars disease because that's what I originally called it, R2D2. And she said, no, it's IgG4RD. I'm
Oh,
like, okay, sounds like the same thing to me
mhm.
because it meant nothing to me. And she said, this is what I think you have. And you had samples taken from, when you had the biopsies. So we should be able to retest those. Did you know that the lab keeps those for a number of years? Said I had no idea that they got keep little pieces of me somewhere. I didn't know that they kept those things, but they do. And so you can retest those for the presence of these particular enzymes. And we're going to do a blood test. And I said, wait a minute. So wait a minute. I've been to all these doctors, had all these tests, had all these biopsies, and all somebody needed to do was draw my blood and to run the IgG subclasses. It's a blood test. She said, yeah. And so we run it, and of course, it's off the charts, and it shows that I'm producing way too much of them, and my body is attacking itself.
Oh, Nika.
And
Oh
I
my
thought,
gosh.
oh, that's terrible. And she said, well, there's a center that treats this. And that's what I was floored. I said, what do you mean there's a center that treats it? She said, in Boston. I said, no, 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 because I started in Boston. And so the IgG4 Center is at Mass General in Boston by a great doctor, Dr. John Stone. And I just met him again a few weeks ago.
Oh, cool.
And so I drove back to Boston to meet him. And it was another place where my insurance would not cover the cost of going to that particular place. So I told him, I said, I got a weekend. Teach me everything I need to know about this. Yeah, I got 2 days. Actually, it wasn't a weekend. It was actually a Thursday, Friday. But I said, I got 2 days. Teach me everything I need to know about this disease so I can go back and tell my doctor. And he was kind enough and nice enough to tell me just about everything he needs to know.
Wow.
And I told him when I saw him recently, I said, I'll never forget that because you were, first of all, he was one of the people who was instrumental in naming the condition, which was really quite wild. And he pioneered one of the first treatments for it. And so he was great. And he really did a really great, thorough job, ran tests to confirm what it was and those things. And so I brought that back to my own doctors. And what I learned was that not only can you bring information back to your doctors if you learn it somewhere else, but it also a lot of times prompts them to look up other studies to find out more information about your own condition. And so
Mhm.
it never hurts to say, hey, I saw this article. What do you think? To your doctor, because you never know. They may have missed it. They don't read everything, but it may also help you.
Yeah, you're lucky because there are plenty of doctors who just give you the cringe face when you walk in with paper from the internet and you say, "Look, doc, here's what I think I might have."
Yeah,
No,
I didn't even do that with her. She knew by looking at my symptoms, but
yeah.
certainly more about the disease. Again, she had only seen one other person with the condition, so she only knew what she knew. And I
Oh,
said, well, this is what I have learned if you're interested. And I learned that later my primary care physician would look up stuff and other people who eventually were exposed to me. But what I find is, again, you have something that most people have never heard of. And what I find is if I go to an ER, like when I had a concussion and those things, they've never heard of it. Or when I had surgery, I've had my stomach redone twice. And when I had the second initial fundification redo, I said to the doctor, when you cut me, here's the thing, my body's going to overreact. It's going to attack at the scar site and it's going to cause inflammation. It's going to cause swelling. That's only a problem because when I had it done last time, it made it hard for me to eat or drink after surgery. He says, no, I got it. He ignores me. I said, I probably need like that step down pack of methylprednisone because the steroids, I only take them when I'm really sick. I do not take steroids regularly. I take other off label drugs
Mhm.
to manage my condition, but
Yep.
this is what works when I'm really sick. He says, no, not going to give it. You should be fine. Well, needless to say, 2 days after surgery, I'm still in the hospital, unable to swallow food or liquids. And so he eventually had to admit that that's exactly what happened. After a scan, we could see that it's all this inflammation, all this swelling around this site, which according to him should not have happened. But because of my condition, it did. So when people are undereducated about your condition, you find that they sometimes, when it says physicians do no harm, cause harm
Mm.
because they're unwilling to listen to what's really going on with it.
Because you at this point, you are the expert on this
I
condition.
try to learn a lot about
Yes.
that too. I try to learn a lot about my condition.
Yes.
I try to learn it because I'm aware that other people are not aware. And so when I go into a situation, I try to, it's funny because when I had the concussion, one of the doctors said, okay, you're starting to get brain swelling. I said, not unusual. And he said, okay, well, we're going to give you a drug called Reglan. Well, I remembered that I'd had Reglan many, many years before that. It caused facial twitching and
Mm.
paralysis. And I said, yeah, my doctor immediately took me off that. So you got to give me something else other than Reglan. I always say to people, it sounds like I haven't been lucky because I've had 36 procedures and almost 26 doctors in all these years, but it's been almost 30 years of being sick. But what I can say is that I've been lucky that most times I've ever gotten sick, I've been conscious and able to speak for
Mm.
myself. I
Mhm.
am one of those people who can speak for myself, so I've been able to. Because I've been in situations where they wanted to give me a medication where I've taken it before and it had bad side effect or not known about the disease and been like, oh, we're just going to do this. I'm like, hey, before you do that, here's the deal. And I think that sadly, by this point, yeah, most times I go to places, I do find that if you speak with authority, people do believe you. And so I did find that once I started saying to doctors, no, when I'm nauseous because I'm having, stomach irritation or stomach swelling, then I need Zofran. That's the, chemo grade anti-nausea medication. That's what I need. Do you know how much you take? Sure do. Let me tell you. And so I just end up telling them what I need or what I take it for. Especially also because a lot of my drugs are off label. So you have to tell them. No, I wasn't taking metformin because I'm diabetic. I take it because I had fatty liver. Why do
Mhm.
I have fatty liver? Because my liver was damaged because the condition causes liver problems sometimes. So that's why I have this.
Yeah.
And so you have to tell them. You do have to tell them.
After Nika, after getting treatment for just symptom by symptom, um, and you're still moving along, working, no
Mhm.
less, and still not having a name for your symptoms, what toll did it take on you mentally, physically, emotionally through all that time?
Initially, I didn't think anything was wrong with it because I didn't realize it was all connected. I just thought for some reason I'm falling apart and nobody seems to know why. And I'm not sure why that is, but they're doing the best that they can. And again, you're trained to believe the doctors are doing the best they can, right? So they're not trying to harm me. They're doing the best they can. They're treating what they can find, and that's the best we can do. So for a long time, I thought that was the best that could be done. I didn't have any idea that it was connected. I was frustrated because there would be, especially in my 20s and 30s, I tell people, I was like, now I'm 50 in my 50s, and I go, I am in better shape now than I was then because I have a better handle on the condition. I have less inflammation. I've treated a lot of the damage that's done because what cannot be undone, even though you find a diagnosis after all those years, and I'm still grateful, is that the damage is already done. When inflammation, again, it's one of the biggest killers in America. Inflammation damages so many organs and so many parts of your body. So it being left unchecked and untreated causes damage that sometimes is irreversible. And so it's something that I will always live with no matter whether I keep the condition under control or not. But you still have flares, but whether I keep it under, I still have to live with the ramifications of it being left kind of, to run wild for
Mhm.
all those years. But at that time, I was just more frustrated than anything because I found that while everybody else was going out and having great time in their 20s, I was falling asleep on the sofa at 9 o'clock because at some points At some points, people thought, well, if we fix the brain, we can give you things like nortriptyline and fool the brain into not feeling pain.
Mhm.
I'm like, yes, except for it's putting me to sleep all the time. Okay, we'll give you a pill to wake you up. So now I got Ritalin to wake up, and I got this to calm it down, and it just became to a point where I'm like, okay, I'm jingling. I've got like nothing but pills. I sound like a human maraca here,
Mm.
and I'm still not getting better, but I'm not getting worse. And so that's all I can do. And so I was just more frustrated than anything. But like I said, I was incredibly fortunate. When my parents were here, they took care of me whenever I was sick. My friends got used to it and just took care of me, and nobody ever really questioned it. We just sort of were like, this is how it is, and this is how she's been, and this is how she is. But to find a name, I didn't know that I needed a name until she slid that paper.
Mm.
Because to have a name meant that I could actually work on something. I could actually be proactive about my health. I could look up any information I could find on this disease. I could go to Mass General because I could find the center and go meet the doctor who helped name the condition. I could, keep track of it and put Google alerts to find out anytime a new study came out. What are they saying now about the condition? What else does it cause? Oh, that's why I have dry eyes and dry mouth. It does that too. Oh, okay. So that's why when he took out one of the lymph nodes, he took out a piece of the salivary gland because it was overinflamed and it was too big. And he thought he took out the wrong thing, but actually it was good he took that out. Like, things that you did not know, now you can know. You can actually learn so much more about it. And I could look up things like, Google, is there a clinical trial for people with this disease? You can find those things, but when you have no name, there really is nowhere to start. I
Right.
know what to look for now, what's associated with the condition and what I can do to treat those things. So if I have dry eyes, then I put in drops. I got dry mouth, I use Biotine gum, or Biotine mouthwash. I have all these things to put Humpty Dumpty back together again whenever something does go awry, because it still does. But I'm more aware of it. I can see it coming now, and I can also figure out other ways to treat it. And
Mhm.
now, that article was based on the first ever drug actually approved for this condition, which was something where I told Dr. Stone, because we were at a conference and we were talking about it, and I said, my mother used to always have this expression, "live long enough," and people were like, "It doesn't say much." I'm like, "It says everything." She said, "If you live long enough, they'll come up with a cure." At some point they couldn't cure polio. Now kids don't usually get it. If you live long enough, you'll get to do all the things. Maybe you don't, if you live long enough, if you take it day by day, you'll get stuff done. If you live long enough, you can figure out a way to work around all the obstacles you have in your life. Just live long enough. Remind yourself to live long enough. If you live long enough, the world is constantly changing. And
Mhm.
what seems dire and hopeless today may have like all these possibilities tomorrow. So
That
it made it a bite-sized morsel that I went, if I could just get through this one crisis, I'm going to live long enough to feel better tomorrow. Okay, I can't make it to the event today, but if I live to tomorrow, I could possibly go tomorrow. Then I'm not going to not do it. I just have to do it differently. I'm not, I never think of it as being ill. I just think of it being different. I just do things differently than everybody else. I get there. I just do it a little bit differently than you do.
and what's so difficult too is that your symptoms, even the swollen lymph nodes, it could be 100 different things on the differential diagnosis list as they call it, but you say fatigue and oh my god, where do you start on that? And so I think doctors start with the most obvious things and they go from there, but sometimes as you learned, it can take a very long time to get a name. But I'm curious about what you know about IgG4. Are there populations that it is prevalent in? I
And
mean,
it's not
we
me.
can't.
I am not the face of IgG4, not in a not in a lot of ways. What's funny about it is that when I first started reading about IgG4, they said it was men. It was usually white men, usually white men over 50. I was like, okay, I'm not him. I don't know how that happened. And then I learned that it was, I believe, Chinese. I believe is it Chinese or Japanese? One Asian population has a huge amount of it as well,
Hmm.
but never black people, which is really, it's funny. And I always say that as a black American, what makes it even more fascinating is what we look on the outside doesn't necessarily tell you who I am on the inside. And that is probably one of the more difficult things, especially for people of color to face. We have such a mixed lineage. And I know, like in my case, at some point with my husband, we had done genetic tests and they found one of the tests came up and said, you carry the Tay Sachs trait. And I thought, isn't that Ashkenazi Jews? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, okay, so this face, and then that's in there. And so there's a whole lot going on in here that doesn't manifest necessarily the way people expect on the outside.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
and then doctors have biases, obviously, making assumptions of what you do have, what you don't have.
and what I find is most people don't share medical history. I don't care what ethnicity or race you are. Most of us do not know beyond our parents what diseases or illnesses run in your family. And so one of the things they also try to do is a comprehensive history, and they'll go, fill out for all these people, your mom, your dad, your aunt. And I was like, she's dead, but I don't know why she died. She just died. Like you have no idea. And so you're not
You're
necessarily
like, I was 5 when that
right.
happened,
Like, and
so I don't
nobody said
know.
anything. They didn't even say she died. She just stopped showing up at Thanksgiving. Like nobody said that, like it's just sort of like it's one of those things. I do find that for a lot of my friends who are ethnic in any way, it's far more difficult. It's things that they don't like to talk about. They don't like to talk about death. So you really, truly don't know what someone died of. And so you have absolutely no idea what your family history is. You have absolutely no idea what your family medical history is. And that is something that we should be sharing or should at least know, because it does help to get to a diagnosis faster. Even your lineage, something you need to know. A lot of people don't know that either. They don't know where their families are really from and those things at this point. And so you don't really have a basis to go, hey, this may be more prevalent in these people. You don't have that. And so it's all missing. And so there are a lot of pieces also that we don't fill in that would be really simple to do. Go like, hey, mom and dad, can you tell me if you know anybody in our family who's ever had cancer or heart disease or any of the things that actually you can monitor to make sure that you have a better quality of life? We don't do
Mhm.
those things either.
Yeah. So what is the treatment for IgG4? Is there a
It does vary.
standard protocol?
Like I said, it does vary. I mean, look, I mean, this the typical treatment for just about any autoimmune disease is steroids. I do not take steroids. I did horribly in prednisone. It was not my friend. I gained like 80 pounds in like 6 months, and I was like, okay, no, we're not going to be doing that.
Yeah.
I found fluid retention in my lungs and lots of other problems from prednisone. So, like I said, I'll take methylprednisone as like a step down, a 7-day pack if I have a flare that's uncontrollable. When I had COVID, I took it when I had COVID because I was having a very hard time getting over it. Sick for 33 days. I was positive
Mhm.
for 33 days. So that was pretty awful. So I take it when I get really bad, but otherwise there are a host of other drugs that are used, some off-label uses, like I take Plaquenil, but I know some people get retinal detachment with Plaquenil. I've taken it for 15 years, nothing wrong with my eyes. But each person is different. And like I said, now we finally have the first ever approved drug for
Mm.
IgG4, which is just revolutionary. That never existed before, and it was just approved like a month ago. So it'll be yet to see how that happens. I know that at Mass General at the time, they were using things like Rituxan injections that worked for some people. So there are various things, but again, same with treatments. You've got to figure out what works for you. Steroids made me feel better in some ways, worse in other ways.
Yeah.
I decided the cons outweighed the benefits for me. And so I switched to something else, and I switched multiple times until I got to Plaquenil, and it's a drug I tolerate great and doesn't bother me at all and helps suppress it. But like I said, sometimes it needs a boost with steroids as well. Sometimes I get steroid injections in my joints to reduce the inflammation when those flare. That's a common practice as well to do. But again, also it's about treating what has been damaged by all the years of the inflammation being there now. So now I go back and again, I see every kind of ologist and repairing the stomach from damage from taking too many pills because those cause problems. Too many pills, all pills metastasize in your liver. You can cause liver damage. So you got to constantly monitor those things to make sure that nothing is going wrong, that nothing is like off the rails.
What else are you doing to manage symptoms outside of pharmacology?
Yeah, so like I said, that's just one part of it. And yes, I swallow pills every day in terms of treating all the other conditions, all the other problems that were caused by it. But like for me, again, I think that sometimes people think that when you're sick or you have an illness or an invisible illness, that's it. That's like life is over. Um, I still live the same life. I said this, so I said, I get up and I ride my exercise bike 20 minutes every day because you still have to exercise. Sometimes it's painful, but you still have to exercise to keep the rest of the systems in the body functioning well. You sometimes have to change your diet. There have been lots of times I've given up sugar because the condition can form things called pseudotumors, and those things feed on sugar and those things. So you got to watch how much sugar you're taking in and some of those things. I mean, sometimes it can cause inflammation or trouble with the arteries. And so you got to worry about those things. So you got to cut down your salt. Um, I am not one of those crazy diet people. I eat everything I want. So again, everything in moderation. So I don't eat it every day, but if I feel like having it, I have it. But I make sure that again, I keep up with my regular appointments. I make sure that I exercise every day. I make sure that I drink a lot of water, even though I absolutely hate water.
Mm.
The body is so much made up of so much water that I've learned that I have to just drink it. I just have to suck it up and I just drink it. I make sure that I do those things. I have a high stress job and people always wonder about that. I said, so, I do yoga, I stretch every day. I try to like clear my mind. And for me, writing when I'm not at work, even though I kill people at work when I write, and when I'm home, I tell other stories that they make it. Most of the people make it. So it's good because I get to let them have a life and do other things to express my creativity. Or even like I used to, I have a blog. And so sometimes I write about like I'm having a bad day because depression is part of it. If I planned on being somewhere and I'm having a flare today for, no other reason other than I exist, I'm not going to be happy today. I remember I officiated, I'm also I'm a minister as well.
Oh, cool.
I had officiated my baby brother's wedding. And the day before his wedding, I looked down and my legs were like swollen. I started retaining fluid. I was like, oh no, oh no. And I was like, so like freaked out. I was like, how I can't fix this in a day. Like there is no steroid is going to even fix this in a day. And so I had to not wear heels. I had to wear flats with my dress instead. But I made it. I made it. Like now I have nerve damage. Some of the inflammation damaged some of the nerves. And so I get like, very painful feet. So I spray lidocaine on my feet to walk every day. And I said, there are so many things that we all do to function that most people would never know. I get up, I spray lidocaine on my feet. That's normal. 4 hours later, I spray it again, but I'm still going on the hike if that's where I want to go. Like I'm just going to figure out. I get, like I said, you get injections in my knees to fill my knees because all that stuff is worn away. Inflammation is worn away some of the joints. So I inject them or I fill them with Synvis to keep the knees going so I can still use those. I get injections in my hands because the hand joints are going. So
Oh,
like,
boy.
so I fill them all. I fill them. At some point, my spine, there was inflammation in my spine. And I said, okay, then I can fix it. So I did radio frequency ablation to burn the nerves in my spine. So there's pain. I just don't feel it. I'm like,
Mhm.
that's good enough. I'm out of here. Like you
Boy.
just maintain. You maintain it because the body is a machine. I tell myself, and by the end of it, I might be the Terminator, but I'm still moving. I'm still moving.
Lady, you have a lot of grit, I will say that, because there's plenty of people who have been in a similar situation where maybe they still have not come to the point of getting a diagnosis to know what lane they're in to even move towards something that will help them, and they just stop, and they're in this just live with it mode because that's what they think they have to do.
I
Um,
mean, I also think there are people who do have you do know what's wrong. And I said, it's hard. Every day you don't get up and go like, this is great. This is just how I am. Um, but you don't because it sucks. I mean, I said this, so I said, I never wanted to kill my husband more than when we both got COVID because I thought he was going to die here. I was pretty sure there was going to be a homicide because we got COVID the same day,
oh, no.
probably the same strain. And I could not move for 10 days. And like I said, it was positive for 33. And day 5, he said, I think I'm going back to work. And I was like, what's his deal anyway? Like I was angry. It's not his fault he's perfectly healthy. It's not his. But then I was angry because I'm like, got the same thing. Why am I always so messed up when I get in it? He gets a cold, I get pneumonia. Like this is crazy. Like it drives me nuts sometimes because it seems frustrating. Because if I can do the same things, I'm eating the same things, I'm going the same place as him, but I'm not him. I'm never going to have his body or his immune system. This is the one that I've got. It's like we had our wedding and we had 14 people cancel at the last minute at our wedding because I had everybody do COVID tests. Because I said we had a
Um,
wedding during the middle of COVID because we were fun like that. Actually, my father he was suffering from cancer. He actually died 2 months after our wedding. Uh,
aw.
but he wanted to walk his only daughter down the aisle. So I'm like, we got to have a wedding in the middle of COVID. And so we bought all the linens and we bought everybody's shoes and we gave out hand sanitizers and masks and tissues and everything there. We literally backed up a U-Haul truck and basically brought the wedding to the wedding to make sure everything was clean and sterile. And we gave everybody said, take a COVID test before you come. And 14 of those people tested positive and didn't make it to our wedding. But we were grateful for it because my father had cancer, somebody else had congestive heart failure. I have an autoimmune disease. It was important to us to do it right. So I learned that we do the same things as everybody else. We just do it different. What I find most frustratingly said is with an invisible illness, or as they like to call it, um, people look at you and again, they make a judgment just like doctors. You don't look sick today, or you don't look like you've had all those procedures. And I remember somebody saying that to me once saying, did you want me to lift up my shirt and show you all the little pinholes in my stomach from all the all the times they cut me. I was like, and actually from the neck surgery, this is the only thing I've ever fixed. And there's still a little guilt with it. I had plastic surgery to fix the scar that was in my neck
Mm,
because it started to keloid and look like a giant zipper. And I
yeah.
remember a man walking up to me on the street and saying, "What kind of cancer did you have?" And it was so disarming to me that I did fix it. And I said, "I don't know." I said, "I do like the anonymity of that. I blended in because when I finally, a coworker saw that Rita Wilson, Tom Hanks's wife, was having a contest for the Huffington Post. She used to work with them, and she was having a contest, an essay contest. And my coworker said, "You should write about being sick." She had seen all my pills one day and finally asked me what I was taking. She was like, "What are you taking that stuff for?" And so I told her, and she said, "You should write about like your illness. You should write about this." And I said, "No, I'm not going to write about this. I'm not going to do it." And she said, "No, write about it." So I got home and I said, "Okay, well, you know what? I'm going to write about it. Whatever. They're not going to pick it. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to bang something out and send it in." And it got picked. And I said, "Oh my God, they picked my essay. I cannot believe they picked my essay." So then I panicked because I thought nobody at my job, I've been at the same job since 1999, and they have no idea that anything is wrong with me. Because even when I was going to the lymphoma treatments and the surgeries, I used my own PTO time. I never applied for medical leaves or anything. I would always use my own vacation time. So I didn't have a vacation for like 15 years because whenever I would get sick, I would just use my vacation time.
Mm.
'Cause I didn't want them to ever feel like somehow I was a burden on the system because I was born this way. So I said, "I'm just gonna do whatever I need to do to take care of me and never make it their problem."
That's interesting because again, some of the other guests that I've had on had said the same thing. They kept working, they did whatever they could. They didn't reveal to their employers that they were ill because I think it does change people's kind of manner and how they deal with you or interact with you, or
Right.
they feel sorry for you, and
Right, or they
nobody
start
wants
to think
that.
you can't do simply because you are the way you are or whatever, and so I said, "No," I did, and I also thought, "You know what? It's really not their business because 'cause I'm performing, if not the same, if not better than everybody else, so why is it their business? If I have the time, then I'm just gonna take it and I'm gonna do it." And I said, I had no choice. I said, "In our business, freelance work is like," I got offered a lot of freelance jobs, and I thought, "I can't take them. I have to have health insurance." As
Mhm.
a single person being single and sick, I had to have my parents and friends, agree to take care of me when I wasn't well. I had to have people pick me up for procedures when I had anesthesia. There was no guarantee because I didn't have a husband at the time. No guarantee this person is going to pick me up, go get my meds, pay for stuff for me, and those things. So I had to make sure that I always had a network of people who were willing to fill in all these things. And as a single person, I had to work full time because at that time I had to have insurance. What was I going
Mhm.
to do with that? I couldn't afford to not have it. And so
Yep.
I had to work. And so I panicked because this article is about to come out in the Huffington Post and they don't even know I'm sick. So I had to go to our big boss and say, "Hey, look, I don't use the whole distribution list often, but I need to send a note to everybody. And I want to share this article before somebody here is going to find it in the paper and be like,
Ugh,
what?"
ugh,
So I said, "I got to send this out so that they know." And so that's what I did. And you're right. I get a lot of, "Oh my God, why didn't you tell us?" I tell you what, I'm the
yeah.
same person I was 10 minutes ago before your email binged. It's the same thing. But what I also found was that they were also curious about it because again, they wanted to get involved. And so that's how I ended up doing the autoimmune association walk. Because they called and said, "Can you do it?" And then my company started sponsoring the walk.
Oh,
Um,
great.
and so we got TV spots for the walk. And so it helped anybody with an autoimmune disease to know that these things exist. These people are out there and hey, they look just like you and they work normal jobs. And this person works here. And this is so I found a benefit to it. Um, especially because I worked in TV to find this outlet to go, "Hey, I can actually do something with this that helps other people." And so that was the one good thing that came out of it. And then the memoir right after, because people said, "I want to know how you did this. How did you you work through 9/11?" And I
Mm.
said, "For 3 days straight." It's tough. I was like, "It's tough, but it was tough for you too." But it's tough for me because I was stuck here without my medication for 3 days. Things people don't think about. I'm stuck here and I take medication every day. Well, usually I kept a pill case that did not have a week's supply because I'm going home tonight. And I was there for 3 days. So by the end of day three, I was really, really sick and not feeling very well because, no matter what you call it, you're a functional drug addict. I need those drugs every day to function. And by day 3, I was very, very ill. Um, and so, those are things that, other people don't necessarily have to think about. When I go on trips, when I go to the airport, I got to take out a giant bag, Ziploc bag with medications and prescriptions where everybody on the line is, what's wrong with that person?
Mm.
It's an interesting, it's interesting to see like how that, when people finally find out when you have an invisible illness, oh my gosh, something's wrong with this person. When my spine went out and I started to have to walk with a cane at work, it was like, people were like, oh my God, what's that? I was like, well, you knew I had problems. Like, this is now a physical manifestation of the problem that already existed. I think in some ways it makes them feel better. Like, oh, she really is sick. I think because a lot of times they don't really think about it. Like, I work from home. One of the only people in my company who does. And I have to keep sending a note, which is funny to me because I have an autoimmune disease. If I could cure it, I would fix it, but there is no cure. And we work in a very big open environment. I said, why risk my body and my health to go to this place that now, since thankfully I was one of the people benefited in the pandemic.
Mhm.
Now I know I don't have to do that in order to do the same job I do every day. But I did resent it because I thought, here I am, a person who's worked at this job, the same job, for like 20 years at this point, and I've got to keep applying and say I need an accommodation to do the same job the same way I do, whether I'm sitting in the office. And I was actually personally offended by that. I'm like, you're not really accommodating me. I'm not asking for an hour change. I'm not asking for less work. I'm asking for humanity to say, hey, we're looking at this person as a human, a person who's been here for decades and going, this is what it takes to just make sure they're safe. But it's just a part of the way life works because the world for them, the pandemic was over. They just went back to what was usual. And for most of them, they got COVID and it was no big deal. For me, I got COVID. I was sick for 33 days and my oxygen at some point was down to 60%.
Oh my gosh.
And I had 104 fever for 5 days. These are things that don't happen to you. So my acknowledgement of the fact that I realized that putting my health at risk for a job is no longer necessary and
Mhm.
therefore shouldn't be done is something that I think like the world is behind on certain things. We want to just go back to what we had before. Sometimes it's not always good to go back. You have to acknowledge that sometimes the world has changed and we have to change with it. And technology allows us amazingly to be in a position where that doesn't mean that it's lesser because it's different.
Yeah. So, Nika, with all of this experience and now your advocacy as well, especially as a writer, how has all of that changed how you might approach stories?
Sadly, I mean, amazingly, it doesn't. I mean, I think that when ever since I've been writing for TV, what I've always tried to do is, first of all, I'm not a part of the story. I mean, the job of a journalist is sort of to remove yourself. It doesn't mean that the stories don't affect us, doesn't mean that we don't go home. There are some that will stick with me forever. There's no way that it possibly couldn't. Um, I think, I think for me, I learned that there's so many stories that we're not doing. Like I said before I was diagnosed with IgG4, I never heard of anybody else who had had it. And there's so many other conditions and people out there who are doing great things. I think what I learned is if I can't do all positive news at work, that spreading some sort of positivity in the world was something that I felt like an obligation to do because I kill people all day. It's part of what I do. It's part of what I do. We
What
sort
do
of
you mean? What do you mean by that?
meaning, like, we sort of profit off other people's miseries. I mean, I cover
Mm,
fires, I cover accidents, I cover
okay.
deaths in weird sort of ways. I cover disease and flood and famines. And that is certainly a part of the world that we live in. But there's another amazing part of the world where people are thriving despite the odds, people who are doing amazing things despite the hand that they were dealt. There are people who have conditions we should know about and be helping with. There are, medicines that people should be aware of. There's again advocacy and tools and tips that we should be giving people that a lot of times, especially in local news, is not really done. We've cut a lot of the segments that I think initially I loved about local news. We cut the education segments to teach people about the schools and the school districts they're in. We've cut, a lot of the medical departments. So we kind of give general medical stories, but we don't have like a whole department that focuses on medical stories anymore. We don't do a lot of good news. And so I think that there is a need in the world for more good news, more good stories, or more at least positive looks at things
Mm.
that may not be great. It's not great to have a chronic illness. And according to Cigna, I spent more than a $500,000 to keep myself alive all these years. That's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. Money that other
It
people know nothing about and don't spend.
it's expensive to stay healthy, it's expensive to die. I mean,
Absolutely.
yes,
All of it is, and like
expensive.
I said and again, tips that I never learned, like I said, when I got sick as a single person, I did not realize I had bought a house for myself when I turned 30 because I decided that's what I was going to do if I wasn't married. I'm still getting my house. So I bought myself a townhouse, which was great until I realized as I got sicker as I got older at 30, like I said, again, that the incident with lymphoma was like at 39, that what happens to me if I die? Like if, what happens to my stuff? And so I realized I didn't have beneficiaries. So I had to get a will and a health proxy. When I had a boyfriend, I said, during the pandemic, the only thing that kept, my now husband, before we were married, to be able to come into the room was that I had a health proxy that said he could make medical decisions. But nobody had ever told me I needed these documents, a power of attorney. I was like, how do you pay my bills when I'm in the hospital getting my stomach done for a month? You need a power of attorney to be able to go to my bank and pay my bills. I had to learn all of those things. I needed a will to give people my stuff. I needed life insurance. The other thing, when you have a chronic illness, again, it's very hard sometimes with certain illnesses to get life insurance and those things outside of your job. I said, what happens to me if I have to stop working? I want to be able to, not have somebody worry about my debt or how to pay
Mm.
for a funeral if they want to have one and those things.
Yep.
So I had to buy life insurance before most people I knew even thought about it in my 20s, because I was like, if I keep this policy the whole time, then I'll be covered. But there's such a beautiful thing. I always say to my husband, I wish everybody had a chronic illness at least at one point in their life. And he said, why? And I said, because it makes you respect time.
Yeah.
It makes you get stuff done. My memoir, as you can see, was endorsed by all these people, and I was getting it done, and I was signed with a literary agent, and then I had to have my stomach redone. And I thought, every time you go into surgery, I might not make it out, because if something happens to me, what if this book never gets out in the world? I finally told my story and now I want it there. And so I decided to do it myself because I just simply panicked, because I thought, something happens to me. What happens to this project, this like labor of love that does have tips in the back of it? What happens to it? And so I decided to do it myself. I wrote my first book at 25 because I started getting sicker, and I was like, on my piece of paper of things I want to do with my life, it's write a
Mm.
book. So I might as well start now, because what happens if I never get to do it? And so I still do the things I want to do. Like I said, sometimes differently, sometimes with lidocaine on my feet, because there are things I want to do in this life and no condition is going to stop me from doing it. But I'm consciously aware of the time that I have, or the time that I may have to be well enough to do it. So you just go ahead and do it.
Mhm. And that's so much for a young 20-something to be having to think about at that point in life. It's just not something we're not prepared for it as we get older, but certainly not prepared for it when you're younger. So at this point, Nico, what would you tell your 20-something self now based on what you know?
I probably would have told her to like fight a little bit harder sooner to get an answer. Um, yeah, I mean, I would have, I probably would remind her how important health is. And once it's gone, there's very little, like I said, that you can do to fix what's already been done. And I think that's like I said, the toughest part now is knowing that I feel better now in my 50s than I did in my 20s. But I can't undo the damage that's already been done because I sat idly by and just assumed the doctor was all knowing and all powerful. So I just got to go with whatever his plan is. Um, I'm much more like the Nika who showed up in her, end of her 30s and 40s and said, no, they're not going to kill me. I'll kill them first. So I got to figure this out. Like I got to get to the answer. I've got
Mhm.
too many other things I want to do with my life. I don't care what they say. Somebody's got to be able to figure this out. I'm much more like her because she understood the urgency of it. She got a better understanding of what she wanted to do with her life and the things she wanted to get done. And so I got more done. I took more trips. I was like, oh, well, I'm gonna have to pay the medical bills either way, but we're going to Jamaica. Like it just, to understand those things, to understand that again, the time is limited. Just go ahead and do it.
Yep.
Try to
Yeah.
wait and do it and
So
live it. And you know what? And not to be embarrassed or to be afraid of the consequences of sharing whatever your truth was, including with my job. Now, if I need extra time, I'm like, then I'll take FMLA. You can not pay me. I don't care. I got to do this for me. I've got to preserve my health. And if I can't make it today, then I just can't make it today. And that's okay.
yep. Yep. What's next for you? What's on the list?
Let's see. That's a really good one. We're looking for a new house, which is great because and we may actually build one, so we're excited about that
Aw.
because we haven't found exactly what we wanted yet. So that's exciting for us to find a new home, like a joint home, which is funny. We had two homes for a long time. My husband had a son, and so we were helping raise him. So we had two homes, And during the pandemic, we merged into one home, which was my home. It's too small. So we want a home that that we each have exactly what we want in it, for a home. I'm always writing more books, always a project somewhere. At some point, we thought about doing a podcast. We know we probably can't do it while we're working because there are limitations as our jobs as a journalist. But we thought it was always interesting because people always ask. My husband's white, I'm black, and we always joke
Mm.
about that. But we're also very different politically and otherwise. And people are like, how do you live with that? I'm like, you respect the fact that you're different. We are not the same person. And I love that he's not me because I like me, but I don't need to be in love with me. I'm good. I'm good. And so I like that he's different and I like that he challenges me on different points. Um, different points and we don't always end up at the same place, but I respect the fact that that's what he thinks and that's what he believes. So we always joked about doing a podcast or something. I don't know if we'll do it or not. He's always wanted to make a movie, so I suppose before it's
Mm.
all done, said and done, we're gonna make a movie. He's a photojournalist. He doesn't like when I say cameraman. He is a photojournalist, so he takes amazing photos. And so we do that. But you know what? We go on adventures all the time. We do it all the time. No matter where we go, we find an adventure and we try to check something off the list. And we have another friend who goes with us also. And so what we do is write down what everybody wants to do. If like we said we want to go see the Grand Canyon, so we did it in a helicopter last year. I
Oh,
had lunch on the side of the rim, and he took amazing pictures, and I just walked around and we had a great time. So we try to every year figure out something. We take the trip and figure out everything that we want to do. But I have to tell people I get it from my mom because when my mom was done with chemo and radiation after 6 months, I said, "What do you want to do?" She said, "I want to fly." And people thought that was weird. And I said, "She wants to fly." I was like, "How do we get her to fly?" And so we went to iFly and we all did indoor skydiving together.
oh, cool.
So
Aw.
I tell people my parents were always the ones who are like, if this is what you want to do, just do it. And so whenever some other adventure comes up, we're like, then that's what we're gonna do.
You gotta
Uh,
go. Yes,
and that's
gotta
what we're
go.
gonna do. And
Mhm.
so we write it down and we do it. And luckily I found somebody who's just as strange as I am. He's like, all right, I guess we'll do that. I was like, I guess we'll do that.
So
Um,
how many of those tips in your this I had to work this hard to get married book, are falling into play here?
I didn't work this hard just to get married. Actually, didn't really have a lot of tips. It was I had a lot of different women and some famous and some not. Telling their stories. And what I found interesting about it is, first of all, I loved it because I had seen an article that said that, of course, marriage rates are down and it's hard, so hard for women to get married and all these things. I'm like, everybody doesn't want to be married. I might add, I wasn't one of those people who wanted to be married. My husband and I were together 13 years before we got
Mm.
married. We got married in Vegas because my friend reminded my mother had just passed. And my friend said, someday it never comes. Before you guys get married, everybody will be dead. Why
Mm.
not today? And I woke up the next morning and I said to him, if they can clean your soup by tonight, we're getting married tomorrow. And so we got married the next day. We had no
That's
ring.
incredible.
We had to go to the mall and find rings. And we got married. And my father was mad. So we had a wedding 6 months later. But we were like, yeah, all right, let's just do it. She's right. Everybody's dying and we're losing all the people we love who we want to be there. So let's just do it today. Um, so we do a lot of that, so it's really interesting. So that book was more like I didn't do anything in my life for one specific purpose. I went to college because I wanted to go to college. I wrote a book because I wanted to write a book. I bought a house because I wanted to buy a house. None of those were the aims of, I didn't go to college to get my MRS. I didn't buy a house hoping some man would move in with me.
Yep.
I didn't start the career that I started in TV hoping that somebody would think I was good enough to marry. I did all of those things as they fill my soul. And that's why you should do anything. You don't work hard at anything in your life for the purpose of attracting another human being. If what you do does attract another human being, awesome. My husband and I work at the same job. I guess it ended up working out that by doing what I love, I met someone that I love, but I did not go to that job and I don't stay at that job because he's there. I do it because this is what I do. This is what I'm good at.
Mm.
And this is what feeds my soul. And I hope that he does the same. But no one person, especially women, should do anything just for the purpose of attracting another person. You
And
should
there's
do it
so
because
much
it's
of that. There's so many women that I because I'm single, 54, never married. I bought my house at 27, so I get you there. And I'm still in the house after all these years because I thought Joe Fabulous was gonna come along after like 3 to 5. Joe hasn't showed up, and you know what? I'm used to Joe not being here, whoever
Right.
Joe is. So it's all good. But yeah, there are so many women who put themselves in that position, and I think people feel that I'll just use desperation, and it's fine to want those things, but you
Sure.
have to be comfortable in yourself that okay, if for now, in the meantime, if you ever read that book by what's her name? Ilana Van Zant? I don't know, I've got her books
Oh,
down.
Yala Van Zandt, yes.
Yes, yes, and it's a is book is so old, and I still have it, but it's so true, you have to be comfortable in your skin.
And here's
And
the thing, women tend to outlive men, so you're gonna be single again in your life. What you have to
yeah,
learn is to be happy with you, because if he leaves you, if he dies, if he never comes, then what does your life amount to if you're only doing it for the purpose of attracting another person? It doesn't make any sense to me. We'll spend more time single in our life than we will married. The average age is still in the late 20s to get married now. If you live to the mid 70s and women outlive men, you still may spend more time single than you do married.
yeah,
You better be happy with who you are, because otherwise it's going to be a pretty miserable life. But we found some of the women in the book wanted to be married. Some of them had been married and divorced and found out they were single again suddenly. And what you learn is at the end of the day, the person that you face in the mirror is the person you have to be happy with. You have to have a complete life for that person, not for the person you're with, because again, happiness attracts happiness as well. So if you're happy with you and you're happy with what you're doing and how you're living your life, you will find those people show up anyway. Whether they're a life partner, maybe not. Maybe they're just a right now partner. And that's okay too. Sometimes people are there for a season for a reason.
mhm, yep. Nika,
And that's okay too. That's
I'll have
okay too.
I'll have to have you on my new podcast that's coming along in the next few weeks for women over 50 looking to reinvent themselves. So I think that you will have more than fabulous advice for women if you'd like to join me on that show with a whole different vibe, but that would be cool too.
I mean,
Uh,
it's funny. Somebody asked me like about my husband and me being sick. And I said, our wedding was in the New York Times. It was called In Sickness and Health and Then a Wedding. And they wrote this whole article about us. And I said, yeah, so they almost made it seem like sort of like, oh, poor little sick girl finally found a dude. And I said, what's funny is I loved what he said, because he said, the woman, like, is it hard to be married to someone who's ill? And he said, basically, it's not her sickness, it's her mouth. She's like just throwing people. And I said, it's so honest and so funny. I have never seen him get mad whenever I've been sick. He usually gets mad when I say something outrageous, because I'm prone to say something outrageous. And I was like, don't ever sell yourself short because you're sick. If you are looking for a partner, never think because you're sick, somebody's not going to want you. Because again, the vows do say in sickness and health.
mhm,
Maybe it comes in the wrong order, but at the end of the day, if somebody truly loves you and is committed to being in that relationship, they will take care of you whether you're sick or not sick. I
mm,
never said, oh, I got to settle for him because I'm sick. I broke up with a lot of dudes. Didn't make any difference whether I was sick or not, and think I have to stay because I'm so sick. Poor sick me. What options do I have? I got a better option than this one. I can tell you that one.
mm,
I can tell you
mm,
that. So you never sell yourself short on that either. I think that a lot of times people feel like if they're sick or they have some sort of baggage, so to speak, that somehow you've got to then compensate for that by, accepting something that's less than. And absolutely not. This is, for me as a person of faith, this is how God made me. So clearly it's not less than. This is exactly who I was supposed to be.
mhm. Well, he sounds like a keeper, Nika, and you have such amazing energy, and I wanna thank you for sharing that energy with us today and your spirit and your story, which is incredible, and all that you're doing despite your journey. Well, Nika, thank you so much for being here, and, I've so enjoyed talking with you. I hope everyone enjoyed listening, and maybe you'll see Nika again on my other upcoming podcast again for women over 50. If you're curious, you can email me to learn more about what that is. I won't say it on this podcast. We'll keep it clean for now, but yeah, thank you so much for
Thank
being
you.
here and sharing your story. I loved it. I
Thank you
loved
so
it.
much for having me. I really appreciate it.
You betcha. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for listening. This is Laura Nozicka. Stay well and keep pushing for answers. Oh my goodness, that's a wrap on another compelling story. Thanks for listening to the Desperate for a Diagnosis podcast. If you would like more information about today's guests or to find out more about Laura, go to desperateforadiagnosis.com. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow show updates and healthcare news on the podcast's Facebook page. If you would like to be a guest on the show, or if you have any questions, advice, or suggestions for our guests, please email me at lauramarie@desperateforadiagnosis.com. Please note, I am not a medical professional, nor am I affiliated with any healthcare, pharmaceutical, or device company. I am an entrepreneur and an independent market researcher focused on helping healthcare organizations better understand the patient perspective. The podcast is not meant to offer medical advice, but to merely share the stories and perspectives of podcast guests.